It's good to be back. Executech feels like home to me. I'm so glad to be here with all of you tonight. I want to tell you a little bit about starting Executech, some of the memories I've had, and the fun it was. As I sit here and think about that, I can transport myself in my mind back to a day when it was just Natalie and I. And I can remember, and I can even almost hear it in my head, that inkjet printer, that old clunky inkjet printer, printing out those invoices that we'd send every month. We were in a house. It was a tiny little house. If any of you watched the pictures at the beginning, it's the little yellow house. That house was smaller than most college dorms. The thing was tiny. It was like 400 square feet. And I can see my beautiful wife, Natalie, there on the floor, stuffing those envelopes of those first invoices. And in those invoices were lines of revenue that were the first revenues of Executech that would later become the largest IT company in the Intermountain West. It was hard to get here, and I want to tell you some of the stories. Early on in the company, Natalie and I were having one of our anniversaries. It was our first anniversary. We decided to go to Italy, and during those days, all I was doing was at Executech was making ends meet. New family, trying to make ends meet. We went to the Vatican. While we were at the Vatican, there's the Sistine Chapel. And on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel is this beautiful painting done by Michelangelo. And there's that part in the painting where God and Adam's fingers are almost touching. And I thought about that, and while I was there in Italy, I had this thought in my mind. I was thinking about, why is this company successful? And I realized then, and wanted to build upon the principle, that the company was successful because we put a human touch on IT. Every other competitor I had did not put a human touch on it. What I wanted was, I wanted to be the type of computer technician and hire the type of people that you'd actually want to be friends with outside of work. That's the kind of company I envisioned. A company where customer service mattered as much as, or even more so, than did technical expertise. I'm sharing these things with you so you knew what it'd take to build it. But I also want to share with you some of my own personal mantras, my own personal themes that I leaned upon as I was building the company. Running it was very difficult in the beginning. You know, we were very lean. There were many days, many months without a paycheck. I can even, kind of shamefully tell you, we had to steal from our parents' food storage to make ends meet those first days. But I had a dream. I had a dream of building my own business. At that time, I had this dream of making $1 million of revenue in a year. That was my goal. I wanted to do $1 million in revenue in a year. And I wanted this business. I turned down a scholarship to the University of Utah. I turned down an appointment by Orrin Hatch to go to the Air Force Academy, all to achieve my own dream of owning my own business. And as soon as I started it, I realized how hard it was. It was so hard. And I realized right then and there in those early days that I essentially had two choices of how I was going to go throughout life at Executech. I could either go through my daily battles and my wins and just go through it like a robot, or I could grow through those experiences. I could go through it, or I could grow through it. And right then and there, I decided to grow through every experience to become better. Let me tell you about one of my failures. About 2 years in, I had this great opportunity on a sales lead. Movie company calls us, we need IT help. Had I won this gig, they would by far be the largest client Executech had at that time. So I go in there, I sit down with them, and I'm, kind of being Eric. I'm breaking the ice, and I freely share my opinion. Everybody in here that knows me knows I share my opinion. So I'm sharing my opinion, and I'm telling them how bad I hate all the local Utah genre movies. And I'm detailing every scene of different movies that I absolutely hated. And then 5 or 10 minutes into this nice icebreaker I felt I was doing, the guy stops me and he says, Eric, we produced every one of those movies you were just naming. I was like, oh, crap. I'd love to tell you that I recovered and I landed them, but I didn't. They quickly showed me the door. That was a failure. I knew it. I was so down on myself, and it kicked me to the curb. I blew it. I was so sad. I started doubting myself if I could do it. I really wasn't a great salesman at that time. I didn't know how I could do it, and I kind of wanted to quit, and I kind of felt like a failure. And I know many of us feel that way in life. I know each one of you go through things. Those failures are very personal. You struggle. That's how I felt at that time. But what I want to tell you is our potential is unlimited. At that time, I did not have the perspective of what Executech could become. I did not have the perspective of this room and all of you in it, and all of you that would make your living on Executech. Having perspective is so important. Humankind is magnificent. We are so limitless at what we can accomplish. I want you to really realize that. The depth and breadth of what we can do is limitless. I could have dwelled on that mistake, and you too can dwell on your mistakes when they happen. But don't do it. It's way too easy to sit down in those mistakes and stay. It's better to move forward and grow through your mistakes. I want to tell you a little bit of story about this past summer. I want to tell you a story about grizzly bears. So grizzly bears are big, okay? Every time I walk up to James, he gives me a huge, monstrous hug. And he's not as big as a grizzly bear. Grizzly bears are like 1,500 pounds, teeth, claws, the whole deal. Natalie and I took our family and we went to the Arctic Circle this summer. It was a great trip. We arrive at the lodge. It was a beautiful lodge. And by beautiful lodge, I mean it had running water and plywood for walls. If you had to hear the forces of nature, you had to go out to an outhouse on the tundra. And as we arrive at the lodge, we're introduced to the place by the lodge owner. And he explains to us, we're in an area larger than Utah. We're the only ones there. He gets maybe 20 or 30 visitors a month during the time that the place is unfrozen. And he goes on to tell us, we have the largest concentration of barren ground grizzly bears here in all of the world. But you don't need to be afraid of them. And I'm like, are you forking crazy? You don't need to be afraid of them? Like, they're big. They can eat us. And he's like, I want to teach you how to be bear aware and not bear afraid. So he goes through all the rules, how you do it, how you live amongst grizzly bears without being afraid. And that experience really taught me something. I thought about at that time that in our lives sometimes we are so afraid of life or so afraid of failure, we're not willing to try. My family and I had an amazing experience in the Arctic Circle. It will forever be remembered in my memories and my kids' memories. But if we were afraid to leave that lodge where all those bears were, we never would have had those memories. So I want to say directly to all of you tonight, are you life aware or life afraid? How do you conduct your life? Are you going to stay in fear and not leave the lodge? Or are you going to go after your dreams? We have more potential than we will ever know. I know that is so cliche, but it is really true. You know what you can do. I promise you that you can accomplish it. I love living here in this country. We live in such a beautiful place where you can accomplish all of your dreams. It's a beautiful democracy. But it's not just a democracy, it's also a meritocracy. By your merit, you can achieve greatness in this life. It's a very unique place we live in that you are able to do that. And you can reach amazing heights in your life by not being afraid of life and tackling your challenges. Let me tell you about a different story. Let's go back about 10 years, kind of almost 10 years to the date. Natalie and I decided to celebrate the 10th anniversary to Executech by going to New York. I'll never remember that trip. I was so excited to do it. It was a great celebration for us. And in 2008, that previous year, it was the first year we'd grossed $1 million. So back from our time in Italy, I'd reached that goal of getting to $1 million. And Natalie and I, to commemorate that occasion, we went to Tiffany's right there in Manhattan, and I bought this watch. And on the back of this watch, I have engraved on it, Executech's first $1 million year. It means a lot to me. It meant a lot to me to reach that dream of having $1 million in revenue. But at that time there in New York, I decided, okay, accomplished, you can do more. I wanted to make a multi-million-dollar company at that point, but I knew I couldn't do it alone. So as soon as we got home, I put my plan in action. Without Natalie's permission, I got a second mortgage on the house, and I got a bunch of money to grow the company. I hired a salesperson. The money was primarily to feed that person's salary for the next year while we grew the company. And that initial event in 2009 there in New York of deciding to go big, to put myself way out on a limb of mortgaging my own home to get money to build the company, that event springboarded us to where we are today. If you look at Executech's growth and watch it, if you look at a graph from 2009 on, the growth is straight up compared to the previous 10 years. And that's because I had that dream at that time, and I decided to go after it. I always loved the late night gigs with all of you. I loved the camaraderie we shared. It was so much fun. And in my mind right now, I can remember one, Lashbrook. I remember being at Lashbrook. We're at this late night redoing the whole thing, and somebody, a little birdie, whispers into my ear somebody's unsavory nickname. And I'll never forget that night as I snuck through the entire office carooning out, "Oh, Sneaky Poo!" And everybody was just aghast that I was, using someone's childhood nickname to have fun. But it was a great night. That camaraderie we shared at those nights is really special to me. It still is near and dear to my heart. I want to compare myself as I stand in front of you right now to who I was as a child. As a child, I was very timid. I had no friends. I was really, really shy. In the 8th grade, I had actually a very bad experience. So I had seen a drug deal go down at my junior high, and I had to testify in court as a witness of that drug deal. After testifying in court the next day at school, 2 of this person's friends, they opened a locker door and put my arm up on it and snapped it in half over that locker door. And I can't tell you how timid and scared that boy was sitting there with a broken arm. I can't imagine that kid picturing himself today of what he's accomplished. But I grew from those experiences to become who I am today, and I can tell all of you that challenges help us grow through life. We are not meant just to go through our challenges. We are meant to grow through them. I know that I have a quirky personality. I know that at the factory they didn't put a filter on my mouth. And I know that some of my ideas sometimes are a little crazy. I can't remember what year it was, but I remember a fun summer training we had at Park City. And in the evening, we had some fun. I'll just leave it as we had some festivities. We won't explain more what we did that night. But on the way back from these festivities, one of our technicians had a great idea. He wanted to ride back to our hotel in my truck, but half of his body inside the cab through the window, the other half, the back half, out of the back half of the cab. And as I'm driving back to the hotel, I have this idea. Let's do a brake check. So I slam on my brakes as hard as I can. Wham! And in comes this technician, hurtling through the cab of the truck, slams into the dash, and rolls up in a crumpled mess on the floor. I think all of you can remember that night. It was a lot of fun. I remember some of you on top of a building. Names won't be named. But ultimately, in developing Executech, I felt like I was building a family. And that 8th grade kid would have had no idea he was capable of this today. But that 8th grade kid did not let his mistakes define him. We cannot let our mistakes or even our wins define us. What needs to define us is growing through everything and always going after the next thing. There are times in Executech's history, I'll be totally honest with you, there are times I just wanted to close the door. DJ talked about early mornings. There's some times that I went to the office early in the morning and I just wanted to end it. Close the doors, it was so hard, I was at the end of my rope. On some of those days, all I could do, the only thing I could do was tie a knot in the end of that rope and wait until I had strength and hold on to start climbing again. That's all I could do. Executech allowed me to grow to be the person I am today. That 8th grade me had no idea of what he could accomplish. But I knew I could accomplish great things as I grew through every experience that I had. I've left Executech, but my home is still here. I still feel so at home with you here today. But I'm still challenging myself. As some of you may be aware, I'm going to college. I've never been to college before. So I'm a freshman up at the University of Utah with a bunch of other 19-year-olds going to college for the first time. It's extremely humbling. I eat a piece of humble pie every day. For many of you that know me, that's a very bitter swallow for me. But it's a ton of fun. It's fun to challenge myself. Every one of you here today know what you can do to grow. And I want to challenge each of you. Own that. Own what you want to do to become the best version of yourself. We are divinely designed. I want you to really hear this. We are divinely designed. It is a fact to reach greatness here in this life. And I know as you go through wins and successes in your life, you can grow through everything. And I want to thank every one of you for giving me the pleasure of having you on my journey to be here tonight to our Executech celebrating 20 years. Thank you.